Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am super excited to teach you guys how to make this 90s inspired tumbler. As always, all of the products and discount codes will be linked in the description box. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with a prepped and glittered base. This is Chunky Parabatai from Peachy Olive Glitters. I have 3 coats of epoxy on this, and I made sure to sand between both the first and second coat around the rims to make sure it was as smooth as possible. And then we're going to go in with a semi-transparent vinyl, and we're going to cut from top to bottom the height of the tumbler. And then once we've determined that height, I'm going to go around the edges and cut out any of these little half pieces of the design so it looks like a seamless wrap. Once I've made sure that my wrap is going to line up at the bottom, I'm going to put this down and use the hinge method to apply this vinyl. If you don't know what the hinge method is, you're basically going to pull back your printable vinyl, cut off about 1 inch of the backing, and then lay it down onto the tumbler to secure it. And then you're going to push the backing off the vinyl while simultaneously pressing the vinyl onto the cup. It's probably easier if you guys just watch how it's done as opposed to me trying to explain it. So I'll let this run through and I will meet you guys in the next step. All right, so now that we're at the end of this, I'm going to try to lay down this vinyl as close to the initial seam as possible without actually overlapping any of the designs that are on this vinyl. I'm going to get as close as possible, and then I'll cut out any shapes that are overlapping, and then I'll take it back a little bit as well, and I'll cut those off, and then I'm just going to hand place things to make sure they're mostly centered, they look like a seamless wrap, and then we'll go around the top and bottom rims, trim those little half pieces, and manually lay down the remainder of the designs as well. just went through with my little squeegee to make sure everything was pressed down. There were no air bubbles underneath the vinyl. And then we're going to take the excess pieces from that vinyl wrap and we're going to lay them down by hand. So I'm just kind of seeing where everything fits in, making sure that things are kind of angled differently so it looks intentional, like it's a part of the design. We're going to fill in the rims, the top and bottom, the base, and then where that seam met, and then we will be good to go. Now that we've got all of our vinyl laid down, I'm going to take my cup and run both the top and the bottom along my cup edging tool. This is just to ensure that we're able to cut back enough vinyl that it's not going to cause any lifting around the top or the bottom rim once you're ready to apply your epoxy. Next, I'm importing the SVG that I purchased on Etsy into Cricut Design Space. I set the width of that to 4 inches wide, and that is the orange portion of this. And then I created an offset that was 0.057. And then once that was cut out in white, I cut an additional offset to that second offset, and that is going to be an additional 0.057. So I laid the thickest offset in this kind of purpley opal color. The second or the middle offset is going to be just a plain white, so there was some difference that you could see between those two opals, and then the top layer is going to be that orange opal. And once I get that applied to my cup, I'm going to start to peel back that transfer tape, and I want to lay it as flat as possible while I'm pulling it off of the decal, especially because this is an opal and they're notorious for lifting and causing bubbles and things like that. I'm going to work really hard to make sure that there's not going to be any room for it to lift. And so I tried to give you guys a little close up there of how I peel that off, but just try to make it as flat as possible against that cup, and that will set you up for success once you get some epoxy on this. Next, I'm going to use that same orange and kind of purple opal vinyl that I used in the decal to cut out these little elements to add to the cup. So I bought this bundle on Etsy, and I cut out there's a ton of stuff in it, but I cut out just a few of the designs in both 1 inch and 1.25 inch. I didn't want them to be a large size because I didn't want to take away from the glitter and from the vinyl that we had laid down. So I just wanted like a little pop of color, something that gave it a little bit of depth, and I thought these sizes were perfect. So I put those on the cup, I just hand placed them, and then we are going to put this on the turner And I really want to focus on how to accomplish a lot of holographic or opal detail work without lifting. I know I get a lot of questions about how I use polycrylic and how I get my opals and my metallic vinyl to lay down without lifting once you apply the epoxy. So in the next step, I'm going to show you in detail how I put polycrylic on the cup, both to seal the vinyl and to apply glitter. So here we're just going to work on the vinyl work first. I just put this polycrylic in a squeeze condiment bottle, and first I'm just going to focus on those little decals. And once you apply it, you want to make sure you're brushing off as much as possible. This does bubble up with friction, so rubbing a gloved hand over that opal vinyl does cause bubbles. So once I get that initially laid down, I'm going to go back with my finger and kind of try to wipe away a lot of that, just to the point where I can no longer see any bubbles. And then we're going to let this sit because it's so much holographic or opal vinyl. I don't want to hit it with a heat gun. If you get too close or if you put too much heat on it for too long, it will bubble up. So I'm going to let that dry naturally. And while the vinyl is drying under that polycrylic, I'm going to take that gloved hand that's still wet, and I'm going to add a little bit more polycrylic to my gloved hand. And we're going to stick our finger in the shaker of glitter and just tap on these little glitter details between kind of the negative spaces that don't have any of the opal vinyl work. So I used Baby Violet and Lassie. They look different in the bottles, but ultimately once I got them on the cup, they basically looked the same. So any light or pastel kind of opaly color will work for this. It lost a bit of color under the background, I guess, of the rest of the tumbler, so the color didn't really matter, so anything should work as long as it's some sort of like a translucent opal. So once the polycrylic was dry on both my glitter and my vinyl, I went over it with 2 final coats of epoxy, and this was done. It was super easy. It was time consuming to get that vinyl wrap on, but I love the effect on it. I love the kind of pastel base with the pop of the opal, and I'm a 90s girl, so I'm obsessed. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell button if you want to get notified of future tutorials. As I mentioned, I've listed all products and discount codes in the description box, along with my social media links. I've linked the Facebook group for makers that I've created in there as well. If you guys want to join that, you can bounce ideas off one another, ask me questions, things like that. So if you want to join, I would love that. And I will see you guys next weekend.